Let's record. Okay, so I'm starting the meeting recording, and it looks like we have a number of people online so far. So I'd like to start off. We're going to be following the agenda. Let's see here. Let me put that on the screen sharing if anybody is watching via screen sharing here. Screen, okay. So can you guys see the agenda that I have up in the email now?
Yes, looks good.
Okay, awesome. So there's the disaster cluster meeting link that should have been sent out to everybody as well. So the first item we'll start with is the April 13th meeting that we had in New York City, which was a workshop on data-driven decision making. Basically the third one. Bob Chen was there. I was there. It was held at Con Edison, and we had a number of things that we talked about there at the meeting. Number one was, identifying and sharing the data sets that we've given ORL levels to. Is everybody up to speed on the ORL levels that I'm going to open up that presentation here. Is everybody familiar with the ORL levels that we've been talking about?
Yes.
Okay, great. So so this is the slide deck for those ORL levels, and essentially one of the things we'd like to do at the summer meeting is to identify various use cases. Carrie Hicks from Duke and Karen Moe are working on a use case for fleet response and coordination, and identifying what kind of data sets could be helpful. And we'd like to talk about that, not only from what data sets would be helpful, but how do we fit those data sets into a realistic classification of the ORL levels. So, for example, these are the ORL levels that we've been talking about and putting together. It's basically our first swipe at identifying these operational readiness levels, so decision makers and users of specific data sets can get a good handle on when data sets are comfortable enough to use operationally. So an ORL 1 is the highest priority, highest operational readiness level, and that means data available now for immediate situational awareness and decision making. Perhaps a person available to contact. We'll fill in more of these bullets as we put more definition into the ORL 1 level. But essentially, the utilities and emergency managers that want to reference data sets being used in the data sharing environment want to know that they can trust the data. And so putting numbers against these levels are going to really help us get a good handle on where data sets are that people might be processing or opening up access to. So I think what I'd like to do here is, let me just, Bob, did you have any other sort of priority items that you thought coming out of the April 13th meeting that we should put into play at the summer meeting for the Federation, so when we have our breakout sessions we can make sure that we get that input?
No, I think, it's mainly the user scenarios and thinking through how to actually implement some of those. Things like the highest priority.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I have up here the second agenda item was Carrie and Karen working on this resource movement use case, addressing lessons learned from Hurricane Matthew. And Carrie's been really terrific in putting together use cases that she experienced actually through her operational experiences at Duke Energy. So that's going to be very, very helpful. I think I also had a, with the use cases here, we also had a number of data set examples that are being worked on operationally. For example, this use case number 4, which is the tornado tracks. NASA Sport is working on taking satellite imagery and deriving tracks of damaging storms, tornadoes perhaps on the ground that can be visible from satellite when you start doing some image processing. So so that is something that's not at an operational readiness level yet because we don't have a process together to alert Sport and request them to produce this kind of imagery. Although last week I did make a request for any type of information they could derive from the tornadoes in Texas that killed 5 people, some of those storms there. There's also a new satellite coming online, the GOES-R satellite, which is now GOES-16, which is showing great promise in the provisional data of the GLM, the Global Lightning Mapper. And you can see examples here in this page, lightning that's visible, cloud-to-cloud lightning that's visible from space from the GOES-R satellite. And we'll be working with that data too once it gets released.
Dave?
Yes.
Looking at these, the operational readiness levels that you're assigning to these, I'm just wondering if you have categories that you're using to identify the criteria or where a particular data set would fit within the ORLs. For instance, I see for the one we're looking at now, being evaluated for accuracy, the category might be, evaluation or review, for example.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Bob, because we were talking about also about ORL levels and how they're referenced to the type of user, right? So somebody that might be doing an assessment of drought might not have a different readiness sense for how they're going to use that data, right? They might not need data that's available every hour, right? They're looking at longer term issues.
Yes.
So I'm gonna take a note of that, Bob, because I think the ORL levels do need further refinement for the type of user. Now the target for these ORL levels are those associated with the Fleet Response Working Group under the All Hazards Consortium, because they're concerned with responding to disasters and doing damage assessments and getting power turned back on and creating mutual assistance capabilities where they're bringing in utilities from other states to restore power. So there's more of an urgent need for that kind of data and information, and that's what this is sort of geared towards. So it would be great to get more input on how these ORL levels can be adapted to various other types of decision makers. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Anybody else have any other questions or comments that they'd like to make? I have, let me open up this here to just show you on the right-hand side, we're taking all sorts of notes to add to a template that Tom Moran is creating within the All Hazards Consortium as we go through and place data sets in this template for the utilities and emergency managers to look at so we can set the right expectation. Right? One of the key things that we want to make sure when we show data sets to these decision makers, or that right up front we have to say, hey, look, this is something that's not going to be available every day. It's a ORL 4, and we just want to get your feedback as to whether you think this kind of product would be valuable in your decision-making process. If it is, then we can take that information back into the group that's producing the data, see if they can accelerate the processing of it or do more quality control or apply more effort into producing that product, ultimately until it gets to an ORL 2 or 1 where it can be used operationally. And there are a lot of steps that are, that have to go through becoming an operational data set, but it certainly puts the expectation level on the decision maker so they know this is a data set that might not be operational for 12 months or 6 months or maybe even more. So what we're really doing is establishing a group of users that can provide us with some pretty good feedback on initial products to motivate us to develop them further into more readily available products. That's what we're looking to do with this. And so the workshop in New York City was very helpful in defining for the attendees there, which were mostly utilities and some other organizations. I'm just looking back at my notes here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, one of the other pieces of information that came out of the meeting is sort of like the formatting of those data sets so they can be accessed and shared in a geospatial format is really important for use not only within the test bed, but also within any GIS systems that utilities might be using as well. So, so we're going to be adding to the topics at the summer meeting the topic of these ORL levels to get more input like you gave Bob and others can we want it to be very obvious when we hit the ground and start giving ORL levels to products that people know what they mean. So that probably means creating a little online help link within the Fleet Response Working Group dashboard and within the testbed environment so people can see what the ORL levels mean. And maybe it's, accessing this PowerPoint once it's finished. Maybe it's, creating something a little more interactive as it gets, as the interest increases. So overall, the 3DM workshop is really catching on with these utility decision makers, these vice presidents of emergency response, because they have never really thought about making decisions that are driven by data. They kind of work off these playbooks, and these playbooks are instructions to follow when a disaster hits, like who they should call, how many, who should come in and work various shifts, who are the decision makers internally, how to access mutual assistance networks and things like that. What we're talking about with a data-driven decision-making approach is really thinking about what data, observations, model output, things like that are available that can drive some of their decision-making. So were there any questions anybody had about the workshop on April 13th, and or Bob and I can to help answer any questions that you might have? This workshop was pretty much driven by the All Hazards Consortium and Tom Moran, who is getting very engaged in this process and really sees the Federation and the Disaster Lifecycle Cluster as a very good resource for identifying data sets that could be used in decision-making environments. Any questions out there?
You mentioned that this presentation you're showing is in work. Is there a draft copy or something posted somewhere, or? or previous version
Yeah,
that is available?
sure. The one that you see on your screen right now?
Yes.
Yeah, that's, I can, Sean, I'm not sure how to post this on the wiki, but I can certainly post it up or send it to you so you can post it up. Is that something you can place up there? And I'm also wondering if I should convert it to a PDF. Does that work any better?
Hey, Dave. Sorry, I was grabbing a cup of coffee. Can you tell me that again?
Yeah, no worries. This ORL presentation that we have up on the screen now, can we post that up on the wiki? That, I mean, is it better to do it as a PowerPoint or a PDF, or it doesn't matter?
I think PDF's usually better because it's smaller.
Okay.
Um,
I'll pull up the wiki now and see if I can figure this out.
Okay.
Yeah, it says a maximum 32 megabytes. On the left side, it has an upload file.
Okay. And Stefan, is that you talking?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't get my
Yeah, no worries.
ID link in there.
No worries.
Should I identify myself?
We'll post it up there on the wiki so you can take a look at this, because it is an evolving process, and as you'll see in these ORL layer, and one of the key requirements that we had, because you can see in the top title, it's a TRL to ORL mapping. So we really started with the technology readiness level approach that is used by NASA, and we kind of somewhat turned it on its head, because TRL 9 is something ready to go for operations, but we made the ORL 1 level the sort of like utility managers and emergency managers think of 1 as the top number, as the, this is the one that we're shooting for. So we made the ORL 1 as a ready to go, data available now, and we simplified it into 4 ORL levels. Now, perhaps in discussions that we have with the disaster lifecycle cluster within the Federation, increase that number if it's justified, and maybe we have a larger number, maybe an ORL 5 for different sets of users. I don't know, but the All Hazards Consortium was really hoping that we could get it to 3 or 4 levels, and we ended up so far having it as 4 levels.
Hey, Dave, if you email me that file, I can upload it right now.
Okay.
And it can probably handle the PDF.
Okay. All right, I'll do that. To your Gmail account, right?
Yep, that's the one.
Okay. All right, good. I'll do that. Hold on a second. Let me see if I can find that real quick. Whoops. It's too big for my email server. You know why? Because I have image examples in there.
Oh, yeah, that's probably it. I guess we'll probably have to do it as a PDF or something.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that can wait. And I can also show you later how to upload the files to the wiki.
Oh, cool. Okay, that sounds good. Oh, you know what? And it looks like April 13th. It looks like I have it as a PDF already. So hold on, let me find this, and I'll get the PDF.
Sure, sounds good.
Okay. I'll just do that real quick so we can get it up there. Okay. Browse over here. Okay. All right, here it comes, Sean. Oh, dang. Oh, there it is. There's the right one. Okay. It's on its way to you.
Great.
Okay, so so we'll get that posted up real quick there, Stefan, so you can get access to it as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry that didn't really derail the meeting that much.
No, not at all. This is a kind of a working, telecon, and we like to get things done while we're on the phone, because once we get off the phone, we kind of scatter. So I don't think Carrie, is Carrie on the call? Okay, and I know Karen is not. So on the agenda item, Carrie Hicks from Duke Energy will be at the summer meeting, which is great. And then I'm working on also refining and adding information to the ORL readiness levels. So those of you who have not seen this PDF document, please take a look at it and add questions and put them either on the wiki or email them to me, so we can make them topics for the next telecon, and we can really decide to add additional things. For example, on the right-hand side of this PowerPoint with different data sets, for example, this one, which is Ken Kaiser's from UAH, we're adding descriptive information on the right-hand side. So Ken, I'm not sure if you have this PowerPoint, but once you get the PDF, please add information that you think is important in the data description. And I also made it a point, Ken, to make the comment that, we're really not going to be looking at your service at UAH as a particular product, right? But as a process to go through that can mine information relevant to a particular event. Is that valid?
That's right. It's data agnostic, if you would. I mean, it's providing any kind of data for an event and just packaging that up.
Yeah. And one point was brought forth right before the meeting was, these data sets, if we're going to eventually, let's say, provide these ORL numbers as little tags or little buttons that are right next to the data source itself, that these processes or data sets should be validated or verified every several years, maybe every 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, something like that. Nobody decided on a number. But just to make sure that, once they get the stamp of an ORL level, that, that gets re-upped or recertified or some new process to verify it's still a good data set. And that's where you see some of the writing in red have been updates to these data sets. Here's another data set of high-resolution flood modeling, which is coming out of GMU in the research environment. So it's basically an ORL level 3, where it could be valuable for a decision maker, but it's not guaranteed to be updated. It could be something that's available for a particular event that this has been running on. So it's currently, I'm not even sure how long it takes to process this particular output, and we'll need to contact that person at GMU that's working on this project. This is another operational product that's available from NOAA, and it shows how many lights have been knocked out after a disaster, after, say, Hurricane Matthew in the Carolinas. The red color on the right-hand side are the lights that should be on but are not. So they're the lights that are out. And the image on the left-hand side is sort of like a base image showing what the lights look like on a normal evening. So I've already spoken with Noah Nesdis about this, and this is a product that's not run routinely. It has to be run via a request, and then the person who put this algorithm together, I believe at one of the universities, whether it's CIRA in Colorado or SIMS up in Wisconsin, would have to run that algorithm. And so we need more information about how long does it take to run that algorithm, how often can they run it once we know that there's a major power outage, things like that. So the good news is that we're really getting down into where the rubber meets the road in identifying data sets that are useful for decision makers in the utility and emergency management areas. So I suspect that as we talk about this more in the Federation meeting, that more and more people are going to show up because they either have data sets that they might want to share or they have processes that they're applying to remote sensing data or observations or model output or data analytics that could be useful that they would like to put into our process of putting in front of these operational evaluators. Any questions out there for anybody? Okay. So just moving on to the third bullet, we have the ESIP summer meeting from the 25th to the 28th at Indiana University in Bloomington. Registration is open. We're keeping the theme here for 2017, which is strengthening ties between observations and user communities. So there are a lot of eyes on the disaster lifecycle cluster. We're really hitting close to the target of what the ESIP Federation would like to expand into, and that is, since we've been working on data for so long, we want to put that data to work and make sure that we can strengthen those ties between these new user communities, because the more we can deliver a user community as an evaluator of various data sets, the more that our federal sponsors like NASA and NOAA, EPA and others, we're talking to the same customers. So they would like us to put their data sets in front of these potential users for feedback, which is wonderful. It's a wonderful role that the Federation can play, and then it can motivate more Federation members that have data sets or perhaps have analytics that they can bring that to bear and perhaps to get that into an operational decision-making stream with the hopes that it would become a subscription service. It would be some sort of supported service because it does have value. And what's important for that value is that we need to start to focus on some of these definitions at the Federation meeting, and even before then in these telecons, by under these bullets you can see, what do we mean by having trusted data? What is that? In everybody's mind, what does trusted data mean to you? And then what's the right data use case for that particular data set? Bob, I think this sort of gets to your question that you had before was, when we're talking about ORL levels, what kind of users are we talking about for these ORLs?
Yes, certainly.
Yeah. So I guess, if anybody has any information that you'd like to share with your thoughts on what do you think trusted data means, I'd love to hear it. I'm taking some notes, and we can start going down this road, because it's not an easy road. It's kind of a bumpy road. I think not a lot of people have gone down it, but other people are looking at what could go into certifying their data as a trusted data source, and we want to leverage that as well. And I think someone shared some information on one of the telecons. We have the notes available in the wiki, but I remember somebody saying, hey, we started to go down that road and we're going to share some of our information so we don't have to reinvent any wheels. So, I'd like to just get sort of some off-the-cuff ideas for what trusted data means, just going around the room a little bit. So Bob Downs, what goes into your head when you think, hey, I need to find a trusted data source for something?
Yes, so for a trusted data source, I tend to look at some of the standards that are out there that have been doing this for some time, and generally they tend to look at things in terms of three categories: organizational capabilities and management, digital object management, that is how the actual procedures and policies and capabilities of staff and the equipment, etc., are able to complete the different processes, and that such processes would be specified. And then also the third area would be looking at the security and technological aspects, that is the newer equipment, hopefully, or at least current equipment and operating systems, and having the different patches in place that might be addressing vulnerabilities, security vulnerabilities, for example. So those are the three general areas or categories that are being used by a lot of the different instruments now that are being used to measure or evaluate trustworthiness of data sources or data repositories, data centers, etc.
Sure. No, that sounds great. That's and that's a great approach as well. I see Shirley, you're on.
Yes, I am. Hello, this is Shirley Barros. I'm the director of the Earth Data Analysis Center at the University of New Mexico. And from my perspective, I think Robert put it all very succinctly in terms of the kinds of things we look for. I think we use the term metadata to describe a lot of the process and procedures, to look at the reliability of the data, the sources, and so forth. But we follow a very similar process as does Robert.
Sure. That's terrific. Well, thanks for calling into the call today, and this is great information. Stefan, what are your thoughts when it comes to trusted data?
Well, I think Bob summed that part up pretty well. And just to intro, I'm Stefan Kleen. I'm a contractor supporting NASA Goddard Space Flight Center here in Maryland. But trust is in the eye of the decision maker, and then when so this kind of building up. So we're doing the trust of the data. It then we need to have what's going on behind that, because people need to be making the decisions and believing the data and saying, oh, I made this data was great because then I could do it, and it can become part of the process. I just was really frustrated when in Hurricane Katrina, and I saw we got the direct downlink of the high resolution imagery, and the roads were flooded, and then reading through that 3 days later, people were still dying in their attics because of the heat. So people will lose trust in your trusted data if it doesn't get operationalized. I've worked in 911 centers, and you get various level of people that are committed to using it. So this certainly is a required part of going through and identifying this. And I don't know what else is being done at then taking this to the higher levels and seeing that people are utilizing the data or interpreting it correctly and knowing the vagaries of it.
Right. No, that's a really good point as well, and one that we've talked about a little bit in that when we eventually get these ORL levels out with product samples, having help files available for what do these products tell you and what do they mean, hopefully with those help files produced by the subject matter experts that use that information, because we know that ultimately when the ORL level gets to 1 and data sets are used operationally, they should be pretty self-explanatory or queryable, so you can click on them. For example, in your screens, I'll just bring up, let's see, go up a Firefox browser and bring up the Fleet Response Working Group GeoCollaborate instance dashboard. And this is something that's being used operationally by everybody, and you have total control of the map itself. So we can zoom out. And these data sets that are being visualized right now are coming from the National Weather Service from their IDP system. And so if you don't know what this is, you can click on it and the metadata comes up, information. It's a little bit confusing. So we're working with the Weather Service to try to simplify this kind of query box. But you can see down here, it says Lake Wind Advisory. So that's what that advisory is, and you can see when it was issued, when it expires, and at what time. And there's a URL that you can cut and paste by cutting and pasting that into a browser. That's not a live link. That would be nice, that you just click on it and it opens up another tab to tell you what it is. But there's river flood warnings here. There's on the Mississippi flood warnings going on. Missouri has had a lot of flooding, and this is what it looks like right now in Illinois and Missouri. This red is a flash flood watch. They have one of 3 attributes there in the same county. Another one that's a flash flood warning, and another one that's a flash flood watch here. So they might have 2 overlapping watches. So when you go to display data sets for decision makers and they're looking at this stuff, they should either see a legend, or they can go over and turn various things out on the left-hand side, so they know the only one that's turned on are the watches and warnings here, and then they can get that information. But any data set that gets displayed, for example, if I turn on the radar data over here, it gets a little busy with the watches and warnings, so I can turn the watches and warnings off, and now you can see where it's raining and where thunderstorms are. But you can't interact with this radar data. You can't click on it like the greens and it comes up and says very heavy rain, or you click on the yellows and it says thunderstorm, or severe thunderstorm. These are all interactive capabilities that we would like to have with data sets that we display, but that needs to evolve as those services on the internet evolve. So Sean, I wanted to ask you, because you're working a lot in the drone area and wildfires, what constitutes trusted data from your perspective?
There are some groups looking to improve it, but drone data right now is kind of the Wild West still. Yeah. Generally, you would talk about anything that you would talk about with normal remote sensing data. You talk about the resolution you can get. I guess one aspect to consider that's kind of important for drone data, I guess also with satellite data, is because it's imagery, it tends to be a lot of imagery, and so then you have this issue of how can you visualize it. I guess that gets a little bit outside the topic of trusted data, but I don't know. I think usability might also be sort of an important topic for this.
Yes. Yeah. I agree. Was someone going to say something?
No, I was just saying definitely. I mean, it has to be usable, but by a wide variety, and people, and they're operating in stressful times. So,
right, exactly. And so, Sean, are you looking into, as you gather drone data, kind of putting that into a mapping environment that can convert those into like web map tiles, or can serve them out as a feature service?
It's being done. I'm not explicitly doing it with the drone data that we have in my group right now. We generally stop at, a lot of our work right now is generally what the client wants. They want it produced and handed off and not necessarily served up. So the most we'll do is do some value-added GIS work or create 3D models using the data. But as far as taking it from that step to tiling and serving the data, it's not that big of a reach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And let me ask you guys on the phone, is timeliness in the group and users that you work with, is timeliness an issue with the trusted data source? I guess let's just go around the room with that. Bob Downs, is that something that's important?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that sentence?
Sure. Is timeliness for your users, is timeliness of the data, data latency, is that important?
Yeah, I think so. The users, well, first of all, everybody's busy, and when they're trying to acquire something, when they have the opportunity, they want it there. They don't want to see something saying, come back later. If you have to provide something at a time other than now, if you will, I think it would be important to be able to specify exactly when. In other words, you don't want to have an out to lunch sign, but you want to have something that says we will be back at 1 p.m. on this date, that kind of thing, so that an individual doesn't have to waste their time coming back over and over again to look for something. They know exactly when it'll be available. If you have an expected release or an update, that should be specified in terms of exactly when that will be delivered. And, if for some reason you can't deliver it on that date, getting a message out in a timely manner to the potential users, notifying them that they won't be able to get it at that time, is going to be able to help them in their planning, so that then when they do go out for it at the time when they're expecting it, it will be there, hopefully.
Yeah.
So yes, I think timeliness is critical.
That sounds good. And Bob Chen, go ahead.
Yeah, I figured you forgot about me. Well, actually, I wanted to make a comment about trust. I've been sitting in a lot of these meetings and with the community, and I do think we can't think of trust just in the science world definition of trust. So, even though Bob mentioned the trust criteria that come out of like the World Data System and kind of the first science realm, I think we actually have to go further in thinking about what the supplied and community thinks of as trust, and that is, they don't care so much about peer-reviewed publications and that sort of thing, but they do care about, data quality and appropriateness issues. And I think, what you're just talking about is they probably do weight having something consistently available and, high reliability and access, and higher than maybe the science community cares about. So, I think it would be good to think about those differences, because people on the federation side or the science side tend to think they know what trust means for the science community, but I actually don't think it maps entirely to the commercial world or the public sector world.
Yeah, that's a great point, Bob, and we've certainly seen that. I mean, some of the feedback we've had from FEMA when they're making big decisions are that, you know, they want to trust the data, they want to know where it's coming from, they don't want to use data that's off a graduate student's desktop somewhere because they're making $1-million decisions on logistics and where to put things. But then after they say that, they pretty much identify a .gov source as a trusted source. And that's not always true as well.
Yeah, I'm not saying they're consistent, but I do think if we talk about trust and mechanisms for rating trust, it's not just the way scientists would rate them.
Right, right. Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's a good point. I'm just drawing a little table here for trust. Maybe to bring up at the Federation meeting or maybe in the next call. So Shirley, what's or let me ask Ken for Ken. I think Ken dropped off. Ken dropped off. Shirley, what are your thoughts on, you know, the trusted side or timeliness of data? Is that something that's important in the areas that you work in?
It really is for us. We have one of our biggest contracts is with FEMA. We're their cooperative technical partner for the state of New Mexico. We also work with the Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, and we have contracts with the Department of Public Safety. We do have our own drone program within the center. So timeliness is definitely an issue in an emergency response type of effort, and I agree with, you know, so many of the new and emerging technologies to make sure that we understand where the data are coming from, you know, how it was flown, when it was flown, resolution. So again, getting back to some of that metadata. So a portion of it obviously is flying it and capturing it, but then the lag time between that and processing these large data sets for decision makers is often where processes get hung up. And so that's something we're actively working on is to narrow down some of those processing times so that we can get timely response back out to the folks that we work with.
So Shirley, do you have use case examples for some of your drone data and how the emergency managers are looking to use it, or do you have something that that might describe sort of your process for using a drone to enable FEMA or somebody to do a damage assessment?
So far, we don't. We haven't used it in that capacity. We just hired a PhD civil engineer that used drones as well as other remote sensing technologies to access pavement management systems. So we're going to start a program now with FEMA to start looking at doing some drone work in New Mexico as part of our emergency response. So we don't have a use case yet, but that's something that's a capacity we're looking at building on.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. And
yeah, kind of with the new administration and directions for funding and research, it's changed a lot within a university environment as to what will be supported. So we've decided that we're going to look more into infrastructure types of things and very applied research kinds of capacity building. So that, and therefore part of the interest in this new hire and working with some drone technologies, not only for our FEMA projects, but also for DOTs and such.
Sure. Are you doing any drone work on potential locations for a border wall?
Not yet, but I won't be surprised if that's something that comes up, and not only potential for a border wall, but examining the thin borders we have already, because it's my understanding, it was just released yesterday in the national news that they've already begun revamping some of the walls on our southern border of our state. So I think they were referring to it as leakage. So they want to plug the leakage. So I've been trying to call around to see if anybody used drone technology to help assess where those are at, or if they just used local technology and knowledge to know where to plug that leakage as they described it.
Sure, right, yeah. Well, that's really interesting. I mean, there might be a possibility of, the Federation. Will you be at the Federation meeting in the summer?
Unfortunately, I won't be.
Mm-hmm. And if there's anybody from your organization that might go to it, we have a drone cluster, and they're doing. Sean is I think Sean, you're a member of the drone cluster, right? I think you are. Sean is I caught Sean taking a sip of coffee while he was on mute.
Well, that's great. I'll know who I ought to touch base with and have our drone expert touch base with. And yeah, we had hoped to go to the meeting, but right now the university, I don't know if you hear anything about New Mexico politics, but our governor has stricken from the budget all university, all higher education funding. As a matter of fact, she defunded the executive branch of the state. So right now there are lawsuits going back and forth to say if that is even constitutional. So that's what happened in our last legislative session. So right now we have funding through our end of fiscal year is June 30th, and a special session hasn't been called, and it won't be called until a decision has been made as to whether her defunding the executive branch is even constitutional. So we're in a big mess, to say the least, and so all travel, all non-essential, so to speak, outside of keeping the lights on, funding has ceased. We don't even have access to those funds, if they exist, until resolution comes about.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But we're still out in the wild, wild west. So
that's amazing. Well, hopefully you can still join telecons because the Federation is supporting those.
Right. We have it a little bit better than some of the organizations because we are 100% soft money. So we're able to work with our funds. They just have restricted travel. But in terms of paying our staff and continuing to do our good work, we're able to do that. But yeah, otherwise the universities in the state of New Mexico and obviously even of our executive branch of government is not sure where we stand just yet.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is. Yeah, it's been a big fight between a Republican governor and a Democratic everything else. And so this was a little bit of retribution she threw our way, being, that she won't be running for office again. So she's kind of on a renegade, doing as she pleases in her last year of office.
Wow. Well, I think, you know, hopefully you can still remain engaged because your comments have been well received here on this side for how you're approaching, you know, some of the work that you're doing and how you're looking into applying drone data because the whole topic of trusted data and applying that is important for the Federation because we're going to be moving forward to identify trusted data layers so agencies can use them in a decision-making environment.
And that's really critical. Just one last comment. In New Mexico, one of the things that I'm sure will emerge with drone data, as it did with LiDAR, is because there wasn't definitive guidelines that caught up with the technology. The technology were faster than the guidelines for LiDAR data. We had a lot of communities that were purchasing LiDAR data and not realizing what it is they purchased. Either they purchased some LiDAR data that then had not been processed and didn't realize that they hadn't paid for processing of the LiDAR data. Resolutions either far exceeded their needs or were inadequate for their needs. So what we seem to find a lot in terms of trusted data in New Mexico is that the technology moves faster than the rules that guide them moving forward in terms of purchasing and acquiring some of these data. So that's been a part of our hiccup that we have seen. I suspect others have as well, where they jump into the technology without knowing completely what it is they're purchasing and having good guidelines. So this is really needed guidelines and development. So we're looking forward to the results that come out of these discussions so that we can guide people in directions to trusted sources and wave a flag about what people should be considering or thinking about when they're acquiring or plan to use data.
Yeah. That's great, and that's terrific input, and certainly you can continue to join the telecons. Our next one is going to be on June 1st, and
Great.
we'll be sending out emails about that. And we're also going to, hopefully in the next telecon, drill down even more so we can prepare for the summer meeting and these breakout sessions because we're actively involved in this test bed of the Fleet Response Working Group, and they're asking us
Great.
for data sets. And we want to identify and leverage as many Federation partners as possible with additional data. So
Absolutely.
So this is good. I just wanted to, before we end the call, if there was any other comments that anybody had, and we'll certainly post these notes and put up the recording of the telecon as well. Any other questions out there before we end? Or comments?
It was a good meeting. Thank you.
We'll look forward to talking to you all. Bob, do you have anything? Okay, great. Well, thanks everybody. This ends the meeting. Hope you have a good rest of the day.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.